Hey, it's been about a month, maybe 6 weeks or so, because of the holidays and everything. And we had a couple of things come up. Um, I think Sean came down with something in between time. I came down with something in between time. Had to get better and such. We had stuff come up, but hey, we never forgot about y'all, and we are now back on the. You can call it season two. Cool. We'll call this the season two premiere. This is Sports Business Insider. I'm Denzel Snipes. That's Sean Rossi, the sports agent, MLB and NFL. And before we get started, be sure to check us out on all of our socials on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Twitch. I got a Twitch streaming up there. Also on YouTube as well. Find us at Sideline Sports. Sideline Sport 1 is right there at the bottom of the screen. Also, SidelineSports.net is our website. And for today's episode, so we all had just gotten done. We just wrapped up the college football season. Ohio State just won a national championship, beating Notre Dame in a national title game. And since we specialize in the business side of things on this show, we are going to give you NCAA football's college football playoffs 2024-25 revenue, as far as who made money and how much money. And well, Sean, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of this has to do with the NIL now and the amount of teams that obviously have a lot of this money and the TV deals. But the first 12 teams, the 12 in get 4 million, off the top. So even if you get eliminated game one, your school still gets $4 million. If you win that game, the next 8 teams of the playoff quarterfinals also get another four. So now you're up to 8. Semifinals, that goes up to 6 million. So now if you've made it that far and had to play all 3 games, you're up to 14. And then the two that make it also get 6 million. There's actually no payout for the winner of the national championship.
Yeah,
Uh,
kind of
but
interesting.
yeah, years ago it used to be the gift bags, and they were very exorbitant and things, and now obviously it's direct money. Um,
Sean,
but
if
the
I'm not
fact that
mistaken, if I'm not mistaken, I believe either as far back as the iteration of the 4-team playoff, and maybe as far back even as the BCS era, the winner of the national championship game got got
yep.
extra money. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird to see, but maybe obviously. So if you like I said, if you started and you made it all the way through, you made $20 million for your school or your conference. We'll touch on that in a little bit.
Of course.
Um, but to see that you get 20 million, make it all the way through, and then it's just like, okay, that's kind of where it stopped. It's kind of weird to see.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And then here's another thing that they get on top of it. Not that that's not enough money. Each team who participates in the playoff, for each round, they get 3 million to cover expenses. First of all, what are these expenses? $3 million for each round. I mean, that's crazy. Are we staying in the city for a week? Like we'll do some more research and report it back to y'all. But it's kind of crazy to see that they gave each team that made it, each round an additional 3 million for travel expenses and meals and whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But that was a number that definitely jumped out at me. Because if you add that to a team that's played, that's another 12 million they handed to that school, for expenses. Do they go recoup that if they didn't spend all 12? I highly doubt it.
Yeah, true. You kind of figure, right, because of the bowl games. The New Year's Six is like within the college football playoff. You figure, well, for each bowl game in the college football playoff, well, you get T-shirts, hats, and a ring for that, and then plus extra money to figure that. Well, hey, that'll be enough as is, right? But 3 million per team, that actually is not too bad, considering that is okay. So you're finding a hotel that's going to house the players and the staff, right? And then you figure everyone's getting covered for meals and everything, and everyone's, let's face it, everyone's not exactly eating at Ruth Chris or anything. Even then, they probably still could afford it, but still, I mean, you figure $3 million should be enough.
Yeah, and it'll be funny if anything comes out where if they got the 3 million, the players were staying at the Marriott.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what was it? So, As far as the APR for participation in a postseason football game, you want to touch more on that?
Yeah, so this is, again, another payout that could be had, and this is a conference payout. And how they divvy that up is, again, based on the conference. Um, a conference payout of 300,000 for each school in the conference that meets the NCAA's APR. Now, what the APR is an academic progress rate. We know there's been a lot of talk of, these guys are, student athletes, but more athlete student than student athlete. But there is a rule in place now where aggregate scores of 930 combined of all the athletes and all their grades, you need at least a 930, and then you qualify for an extra 300,000. And if you fall under it, you could actually be fined. So if
Mm,
you have athletes that are holding this score down and bringing you under 930, you could actually be fined for continually being under the number.
mm,
I think this is a good counter to the argument athlete student athlete, but how many schools are just hitting right at 930, how exactly they're getting there, and how many scores are we maybe waiving or not taking high and low and type of thing.
right.
It's interesting to see though that there's an incentive bonus for meeting some academic standards.
Hmm. Okay then. Yeah, and it's really funny how in one direction, because it sounds like there's no real medium, right? In one direction, it's like, hey, you can earn some extra money, but if not, you're gonna lose money because we're gonna fine you.
Right, and it's like, so hopefully one of your teams was in the playoffs. I guess if you're going to eat that fine, but it'd be interesting to see if you're continually under it. Can the fines become scholarship penalties? Do they start knocking into your NIL cap? How far do they take it if you're just continually under the 930, but you're putting together a winning program?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Now this next right here, um, I'll go into the two teams that made the national championship game, give a quick explanation, and then I'll pass it to you. So the Notre Dame Fighting Irish have earned $20 million for their three bracket wins, far more than any other team in the field. They got four for qualifying for the CFP, four for advancing to the quarterfinals, $6 million for making the semis, and $6 million for reaching the national championship game. Now Ohio State, their conference splits payouts evenly among its 18 schools, meaning that the Buckeyes will only see 1.1 million of the income that their wins generated. And then even with the combining the distributions from Penn State semifinal run, Oregon's quarterfinal appearance, Indiana's first round exit, Ohio State will only receive a check of approximately 2.6 million, same as its 17 other conference mates. Now, you may ask, why is it that it is like this? Because the Irish clearly out earned them, and that is simply because the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are affiliated with no conference, and probably one of the many reasons why they refuse to join a conference. Sean?
No, absolutely. I mean, the number, the difference is obviously staggering because Ohio State, um, I can't remember if they were in the first round or if they had the bye, but so they essentially earned either 14 or 20 million, but out of that number, they're only going to see 1.1 because their conference rules is we're going to split this, even though it was earned majority by one team,
Mm-hmm.
and not from the money side of Irish made 20 million, but you could see why a conference like the Big Ten is going to do this because how much more advantages do you want to give just to Ohio State?
Right.
I could see where they're like, okay, Ohio State's already the richest school. They already spend the most money on athletics. Like, how much more do we want to just, really icing where Ohio State's going to be? That Alabama team we saw when Saban was there, they're going to be the next Alabama, but of the NIL era because of how much money they have flowing.
Yeah.
So I think that played into when the conferences looked at this and the schools that are in the conference. It helps obviously keep. Obviously, there's some big schools, but like Indiana, like that's a little bit of a surprising run they made this year.
Yep.
Will they
11 wins.
will they repeat that next year? It's hard to say. Depends how many they lose, how they do in the transfer portal. There's a lot of things that go on in college football now. We basically have free agency here for the next 2-3 months in college football. Um, so I think that's the only way where you keep these big conferences kind of at least even where, even the teams that are maybe supposedly the bottom feeders can at least still be competitive year in and year out and possibly, at least upset Ohio State. And Ohio State's not at least going to go undefeated every year.
Yeah. As far as the previous comparison, with Ohio State having to split their payout versus the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, to the music fans out there, think of it as the artist signed to a major label versus the artist who's independent. The artist that signed to the major label, when their album sells a ton, well, they still have to split the profits with the label head, the A&R, the in-house producers, promoting, marketing, everything. Whereas the independent artist could get the same amount of money, but that's all or mostly theirs because they're indie. If that makes any sense.
No, 100%. And that's, like you said, it's probably why Notre Dame will never join a big conference unless they're absolutely forced to. And we'll touch on a little bit on, how big these conferences may get here in a little bit.
Absolutely. We're yeah, and just a little bit. So if you want to touch on the SEC, for example, because they have different parameters with how they split things versus the Big Ten.
Yep. So, again, another conference doing its own thing right now. The brackets are 3.5, 3.75, and 4 million for each round. So Texas earned, an additional 10.25 for winning the first round and quarterfinal games. Addition to what the CFP gives them. So that, again, another little incentive from a conference that's doing it a little bit different. There is no conference sharing from what our research showed us in terms of the SEC doing stuff like the Big Ten and that split payout sharing. That doesn't seem to be the case there.
Right.
And then one other note, obviously the ability to do these payouts is ESPN pays $1.3 billion for the rights to televise the entire series.
Yeah. That's insane right there. And you know what? Honestly, it was money well spent. I think it was well worth it. People, of course, complained about the first round because there were so many blowouts, right? But ultimately, um, they really didn't have that many complaints because it's like, well, they got the field right. I think they said the seeding was a little off, but as far as the teams that deserve to be in, they got it right.
Yeah, I think maybe you've got some argument there whether Boise should have had the bye or not. I think they've got to start looking at entire schedules and not just, we lost late in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And last but not least, what has this done overall for conferences?
So, and we touched on it. Ohio State overall, all their athletics, not just football, had spent $300 million on athletics this past year. That number's up about 28 from what they spent last year, which was 272. So they're in this average of spending this. And the other belief that's out there is, and it's right around the cap. The cap was 22 million. Is they paid their football players 20 million from the NIL collective. And this obviously is what we've talked about above. Is not only could this create a situation where other teams are going to leave conferences, not only for the profit sharing, but when there's collectives to be had, and it's not just Ohio State that has a collective. Almost every school has a collective now. If you can put these collectives in the power conferences and get even more money behind the school, even if the school is not going to turn around and make the CFP, but now all of a sudden they have a collective putting $20 million in, eventually that school is going to have a good roster enough to make the CFP. And like we talked about, that's why you've got free agency here. You've got the transfer portal now. They don't call it free agency. Obviously, as you guys know, they call it the transfer portal. But that's really what it is. Teams are offering players money behind these NIL collectives. I can't mention the schools, but I personally, because of the business I'm in, I've seen teams offer six figures to guys to transfer cars, and it's all behind these NIL collectives. And again, it's nothing against the rules now. It's all a marketing deal now.
They can't. This isn't, the 1980s SMU death penalty days anymore. It is totally legal to offer an athlete whatever the hell you want for them to come to your school. The crazy part about all this is seemingly with the retirement of Nick Saban, it's almost like it leveled the playing field.
Yeah, and that's why, like we've touched on the show several times, these older coaches you see leaving these schools, a lot of it has to do with it's not really recruiting anymore. Yeah, schools are looking like, hey, we need a tight end because this guy's leaving, and we need to fill this, or we need a defensive back. So schools are filling, kind of like NFL teams filling free agency, like, hey, we were weak at defensive back. That's what we're going to add. but it's no longer necessarily who's the best defensive back in the portal. Who can we afford in the portal?
Yeah. Yeah, shoot, if I'm not mistaken, I think Arch Manning alone, well, he got 1 million. Quinn Ewers got the biggest at one point at like 3 million.
Yeah, and now with these caps at 22, and that's just from the schools. These kids can still go out and get their own NIL deals on top of it from Tops and Panini, Leaf, and other companies. So that's just from the schools that can spend 20 million on the team, and then like you said, a kid like Manning, he's going to have deals from other companies coming in. So whatever he makes, the one, the two, he's going to have additional coming in NIL from his own marketing deals that he'll get.
Yeah, it literally, what is it? Um, okay, I lost my train of thought here. Oh, that's right. Um, it's literally turning into like another professional sports league if you think about it. Some of these, I actually looked the other day. Quarterback Cam Rising of Utah is about to enter his 9th year in college, and I got to thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? With the whole NIL thing going on here, some of these players may take advantage and make as much money as they can in case either they don't get
100%.
drafted by the NFL, or if they get drafted and things don't work out, they still got a nest egg that they made from college.
100%. And you're not. It's funny because you'll probably make more on NIL than you would in the UFL.
Yeah,
So if these guys don't make the NFL and they go to the UFL, they probably would have made more money staying a longer time in school. And it's amazing, now because of injuries and COVID years, how many years these guys are in and coming out, 6th, 7th year seniors, like it's incredible. And now with that new ruling that's not in place yet, but the belief is the NCAA is going to grant a 5th year to everybody. And that's going to be
wow.
going forward. So that could change a lot of things where you could just see a lot of guys opting for that 5th year. And I'll stay here even if they stay somewhere 4 years, I'll jump in the portal for my 5th year just in case. The thing that the portal is doing, it's also making teams when guys are at the end of the season making decisions to, if they have a year of eligibility left, it's making them make offers like, hey, we'll give you this if you stay. If you don't
Yeah.
declare for the draft, this is your NIL deal for next year. What do you want to do?
Mm, interesting. And you have players like let's see, I'm sorry, Cam Rising. Cam Rising actually had a couple of injuries in his career, so he
And every
medical
time you get an
redshirted.
injury, it's almost like your contract rolling over. You get another year.
You get another year, exactly. He's had some injuries throughout his time. He's about to enter year 9 in college football. That is insane. But no, most definitely I can see that this is how it's going to go. And as far as the comment about the mega conferences, I think they're mega conferences right now. You know,
Yeah, and they're getting larger. Obviously, we still have Florida State doing its thing where it's still trying to exit the ACC, and I think what we're heading to, unfortunately, obviously we have 12 teams in the playoff now. I think eventually you're going to have to see that expanded to 16 because I think you're going to see conferences that have 25 to 30 teams. You're going to see more schools that want to go to the Big Ten and get a piece of this profit sharing, knowing, hey, if 3 Big Ten schools make it, but we don't, we're still probably
yeah.
going to make $1 million.
Also consider that beginning last year, the Big Ten struck that deal with NBC.
No, and that plays a role in these guys in the Big Ten being able to max out that 20 million cap. Just because that cap is there does not mean the schools can do it. But the Big Ten schools, 100%. The SEC schools, 100%.
Yeah,
You start getting
SEC's.
into some of the other conferences, and it's like, oh, we'll spend 15, but we better hold on to that 5.
Yeah, it's almost like what's going to happen with the new Pac-12 next season, because the deal with ESPN and the Southeastern Conference, that's not going anywhere. Like they've kind of been with ESPN forever, right?
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
that's not going anywhere. But these other conferences have had to make major moves to match with the Southeastern Conference. Hence the Big Ten with I'm sorry, not just NBC. They with CBS as well. The Big Ten debuted on CBS just this past season.
Yeah, and then you've got Texas A&M. They've got their own things going on. Like it's just incredible what these teams have going on TV wise.
Yeah, they do absolutely. Well, that's all we have for today's return episode, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next Thursday for some more Sports Business Insider. He's Sean Rusty. I'm Denzel Snipes. You all have a great weekend.